Hello everyone. We're going to continue with our 3D Studio Max tutorials. Today we're going to get into some basic modifiers and some basic modeling tools in Max, and show you how to do a couple of different modeling styles in a couple of different ways. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to create a table, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways we can create table legs using the various modeling styles in Max. We'll go from basic primitive modeling to spline modeling and on into some edit mesh modeling. And we'll cover also a few different modifiers while we're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a box and just create it in my top viewport. And then when I go to the Modify tab, I'm going to adjust these length, width, and height settings. The length I'm going to make 60 inches. The width I'm going to make 30 inches. And then the height is going to be 2 inches. So there's my box. There should be my tabletop. Alright, the first go around we're going to create some table legs, just some simple table legs using some simple primitive objects. So we'll start with a cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cylinder in my top viewport, and I'm going to make this radius on this cylinder a 1-inch radius, and I'm going to make the height let's say 30 inches as well. Okay. Alright, so now what I need to do is align my table leg up with my tabletop, or vice versa. In this case we're going to align the table leg to the top. So I'm going to, with the table leg selected, I'm going to use Alt A, which will bring up my Align tool, or I can go up here to the main toolbar and click on the button Align. And I'm going to click on the table top, which brings up my Align selection dialog box. And I want the maximum of my cylinder to be aligned to the minimum of my table in the Z position, which is up and down. So, and you can see in this left viewport, the maximum point of my table leg, which is the top of this cylinder, is aligned with the minimum of my box, which is the bottom of this box, in this one axis. You can see in these other axes nothing has really changed, but in this Z axis, because I have it checked, I have these now lined up, and I can hit apply. So now that has been reset, and now I can go, I want the minimum in the X position to the minimum in the X and Y. So that finds the max, or it finds the minimum point in the Y position here in the top viewport of this table leg, and it also finds the minimum point on my cylinder in the X and Y, and it aligns those 2 points together. So now those 2 points are in the corner. So now I have my table leg perfectly aligned with the bottom of my tabletop, and I also have it perfectly aligned to the corner of my tabletop. And I hit OK, and there we go. So I can copy this over, and just for these purposes I'm going to just copy it over and eyeball it, but if you wanted to, you could go in and align each one of these to each corner. I'm going to make these instances so that whatever changes I make to the parent, the first one will get propagated to the rest of the siblings. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these by selecting one and then holding Control down and selecting the other one, and hold Shift and click and drag to copy these over to the other side as an instance. And there's my table. So I'm going to select one table leg here, and I'm going to go into my modifier list, and as I look through the list here, I can do a couple of things to make this table leg a little more interesting than just a simple cylinder. I can use a taper, which will kind of give it more of that old style table leg look. So I'm going to look for taper modifier. There it is. And you can see, since these other cylinders are instanced, they automatically get the taper modifier as well. So I've got an amount here, and you can see it's tapering the wrong end. Actually, I want the bottom end to be tapered, and I want it to taper down like this. So what I can do is go into my sub-object taper, or I can go into my gizmo and use my rotate tool and actually rotate this gizmo, and then I can move it up, and there we go. So basically I've taken that taper effect and manipulated it and changed the way it affects this table leg just by going into the sub-object gizmo and moving that gizmo around. You can see how that changes here in the viewport. Alright, so there's 4 table legs that have been created, aligned, and tapered. Alright, I'm going to get rid of these, or I can actually group them just by selecting them, hitting group in the main toolbar, and say tapered legs. So I can group these together so that they stay together as a group, and save them or hide them or put them on another layer. For now I'm just going to say hide selected, and now I'm going to select my box, which is my tabletop, and this time we're going to do something with some spline modeling. So I'm going to go into front viewport, and I'm going to create a profile of a table leg that I want to use. So let's go to create, shapes, line. Okay, so here in the front viewport, I'm going to use my 2.5 snaps, which will allow me to use some snapping features while always drawing against the major grid line. So I'm going to go ahead and snap here to the corner and just start drawing. Now, what you have to remember about when you're drawing with splines, if you ever get your cursor off of your active viewport, you can center it up by hitting I on your keyboard, and that centers up your cursor to that viewport. You can see here in these other viewports, I'm staying on that major grid line because I'm using those 2.5 snaps. So I'm going to hold shift down to get a straight line, and there we go. So there's a simple profile. We just need half of the line, or the profile of the table leg, because this is going to be lathed over or revolved. So once I have the lines created, I can go to Modify tab and go into my line and open up the drop down list and go to the sub-object vertex. And now I can go in and start moving my vertices around to get it a little more like I wanted it. Let's see, I'll make a little bit of indentation there, and let's say I want this to taper off at the bottom. Pull these in just a little bit. And let's say I want to make this, instead of having a sharp corner here, I want to make that a more rounded corner. So I right click right on that vertex. Sorry, my graphics is acting crazy. And I choose Bezier instead of corner. And now I have these Bezier handles that I can use to smooth out the tangents going in to that vertex and coming out. Alright, so that looks good enough. So there's the profile of my table leg. Now I just need to go to Modify tab, Modify drop down list, Lathe. So I'm going to look for my Lathe modifier, and that will revolve this spline around, and it revolves that spline based on the center point of that line. So wherever the center of this line is, the dead center in all axes, that's where that axis is going to be on the line. So what I want to do is when I get to my lathe modifier, I want to say I use the minimum or maximum. You can do that, and if that doesn't work, then you can go in and manually move the axis by going into your lathe modifier, drop down subobject axis, and then grab that axis in whatever axis you want, in the x-axis in this case. And I can also go back into my spline into subobject vertex and turn on show end result, which will turn on the end result of my modifier, showing my modifier up the stack. And now I can adjust that here in real time to show what changes will be made to that lathe modifier. So I can go in and make a little bit of different shape here. Something like this. There we go. And that's a little better looking table leg. So bring that over. And then again, copy over as an instance. Sorry, all my dialog boxes are going off the screen here. And again, over in the Y as an instance. And there's my table legs. Just by using a simple line and a lathe modifier, you can get a lot of different models, shapes by using these simple tools. So I'm going to select these, group these together, and call them lathes. And I'm going to hide these, hide selection. And I'm just right clicking on those and using my quad flyout, or I can go over here to the display tab, look down and say hide selected. Alright, and then the last way I'm going to show you to do this is we can actually extrude the legs directly from this box, and that's a little more of an efficient way to do your modeling, especially if it's going to be a simple object like this. It saves on polygons, saves on rendering time, and it's a lot quicker, and it actually gives you a little more, in the long run, it gives you a little more freedom. So let's go in and to our box and look at our box in our modifier window. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in some segments to this box so that it makes it a little more pliable. I'm going to hit F3 on my keyboard for a wireframe to see those segments added in. So I'm going to add 3 segments in the length and 3 segments in the width. F3 again for my shaded view, and then F4 to see my wireframe overlay on top of my shaded. Alright, so now I'm going to go into a top viewport, and on this box I'm going to put an edit poly modifier. So in your modifier drop down list, look for edit poly, and edit poly and These editable mesh tools and editable poly tools are very powerful tools for modeling, and this is where you'll be doing 75% of your modeling once you get into more organic modeling. So you definitely need to get more familiar with Edit Poly, especially. There's 5 sub-object modes in Edit Poly. Each one of these modes represent a different makeup of our whole model. So for example, the first mode, vertex mode, refers to each point or each intersection. And you can see these, once I'm in this vertex mode, I see these little blue dots show up. So each one of these blue dots is a vertex, and they're at every intersection of the edges, which is the next sub-object mode, edge. You can see now you can select the sub-object edges. And then there's a border sub-object, which if you have any open polygons, I'm going to delete this polygon, and now I have a border here which surrounds an empty spot where there are no polygons. Let me go back and undo. And that brings us to our next sub-object, which is polygon, which allows you to select these large polygons which make up our model. And then the last sub-object is your complete model, and that is what is considered your element. Alright, so for this we're going to go into sub-object vertex, and we're going to be moving some of these vertices around, and we're actually going to make these squares the beginning of our table legs. So to do that, I'm going to go into a top viewport. Turn off the grid by hitting G on my keyboard. Let's make a window selection around the center set of vertices, and I'm going to right click or go up to my main toolbar and use my scale tool, and with these set of vertices selected, I'm going to just scale in the Y and scale right out to the edge, and then I can go in and select this set of vertices and scale these in the X. So now you can see what we've made here. We've sort of roped off these polygons to use as table leg extrusions. So if I look at it in a perspective viewport, now I can go into sub-object polygon, select each one of these polygons by using my select tool and holding down Control. And if these polygons don't turn red when you select them, the keyboard shortcut for turning that red shaded mode on and off is F2. So you can toggle that F2, that red shaded mode for a red selected, on and off. Alright, so with those polygons selected underneath our table, what I'm going to do is go over to my Edit Poly modifier, find Extrude in the Edit Polygons, and right next to the button Extrude there's another button that's Settings. Click on that button, and that brings up your Extrude Polygons dialog box, and you can use that spinner button to just spin a number down. Let's say we want 25. So that has been extruded 25 inches from the start there. Okay, and there you go. There's a real simple way to make table legs. I'm going to turn off this edge mode. And there's our simple coffee table. And this is going to have the least amount of polygons of all the other types of modeling that I've showed you. And you can also go in this Edit Poly and do some other things, like I can go in and chamfer all of these edges if I wanted to. So for example, I could go in and chamfer just the edges of the table legs by using some chamfering tools. So it doesn't look as boring. Go ahead and chamfer the edges on the tabletop itself. So that looks a little more interesting. Alright. So that concludes our basic modeling for Max. We're going to get into a lot more advanced modeling and intermediate modeling in those sections. So come back and join us. And we just touched on the tip of the iceberg for modeling. So there's still a lot more to come. So come back and check back with us, and our next video lesson is going to be on animation, so you don't want to miss that. I hope you enjoyed it. Come back and see us.